Ready for it? The Mason County Joint Planning Commission is now in session. Roll call, please.
David Reed.
We're starting. Let me go in there.
David Reed.
Here.
John Hutchings.
Here.
John Best.
Here.
Kirby Rosser. Lindsay Phillips.
Here.
Harold Woods.
Here.
Rick Lawrence.
Here.
Michael Parker.
Here.
Rick Larger. I'm here. Michael Clark.
Here.
Okay, I wasn't sitting for any of that, so I don't have it.
That's fine. It's just roll
Closing
call.
the door.
Yep.
Next on the agenda is the approval of November 5th regular meeting minutes. Is there any additions, corrections need to be made before we ask for a motion? Hearing none, do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
John, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? New business. Andy Shaw, presentation and question and answer.
Okay, so this is a public hearing, so we need a motion to exit the regular meeting and enter a public hearing.
You have a microphone? Yes.
We have one.
I'd like to make that motion that we exit the public, private hearing with the public hearing.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're into public.
I'll try to raise my voice. All right. Everybody, welcome to this public hearing. This public hearing is being held at the request of the Planning Commission to hear testimony from Andy Shaw of Hemley Horn. This is going to be a little bit different from the typical public hearing that the Planning Commission has. Mr. Shaw is going to be the only one offering testimony. You all are going to get a chance after the Planning Commission, after his presentation, and after the Planning Commission asks questions, you all are going to get a chance to ask questions yourselves. So we haven't really passed any formal rules, but I think what would be best is anybody who wants to ask a question, you get one question, then we move on and get through everybody, and then we can go back through and ask questions. We're not going to swear you in because anything you guys say, you guys are going to ask questions. Really, the testimony is going to be from Mr. Shaw. Does everybody understand that? Great. So at this time, I would like to offer into evidence that this public hearing was noticed to the public. Here's a printed copy of the digital tear sheet used to generate the advertisement in the Ledger Independence. It's really small on this legal paper, but it's right there. As stated, you all, after the Planning Commission asked their questions, you all would get a chance to ask your questions. Again, we're not going to swear you in, but before you ask your question, please stand up and say your name, because I'm going to generate a list of names for the record. We have a stenographer here tonight, so she wants names, so that's what we're going to do. Again, what you're saying is not testimony. It's really just Mr. Shaw that's going to do testimony. So at this time, Mr. Shaw, would you stand up, please? Raise your right hand. Sorry. Do you swear or otherwise affirm to tell the truth? Please say I do. I do. Okay. So at this time, Planning Commission members, you guys move over to the front row that I've reserved for you. Please try to maintain the same order of seating that you had for the sanity of our guests.
There's some chairs back here. We'll take one of those. There's some extra chairs.
Yeah, I think we have plenty of seating. You guys are just going to have to...
There's chairs if I want them.
I must have really like that.
Yeah. Gotta be sitting on my floor.
All right.
Good evening, everybody. Glad to be back in Mason County. Everybody hear me all right in the back? Good. Good. Well, thank you.
There's a microphone there if you'd like to use.
Okay. All right. So again, my name's Andy Shaw. I represent Kinley Horn. Judge McNeil reached out to us, Kinley Horn, and asked if we could provide a little perspective and education in the topic that you're all considering here in Mason County. So I'm a civil engineer. Graduated with Bachelor of Science from Penn State. And Master's of Science in Water Resources Engineering from the University of Maryland. Been practicing not quite 30 years, it'll be 30 years next year. I started my career at the University of Maryland Facilities, campus planning, and 30 years later in data center campus planning. And so, seen a lot from a data center perspective. In Central Ohio, which I've called home, family and I, since 2004. Data centers started becoming a thing. Data center campuses started becoming a thing in 2010-ish, kind of right out of the recession. And so we've seen a lot. We've seen a lot from the infancy of data centers. Now, Central Ohio doesn't have the most data centers, but it is the fastest growing. And a lot of that is readily available water, readily available power, robust roadway networks. And so when Judge McNeil reached out and Mr. Larger here said, we here in Mason County, we're thinking about doing our first one, and we'd appreciate some perspective. And so we'll start with a little presentation here that we've put together. I will say at Kinley Horn, we work with everybody, the municipalities, the developers, the end users, and it's all about making these campuses fit within the communities that they reside. It's not who do you prioritize, the developer or the jurisdiction? Look, if the developers and the end users don't do the right things, they're not going to build another one because that jurisdiction is going to tell the next jurisdiction, hey, something shady happened, right? And so it is, when we talk about a partnership, it's the community, it's the data center developers, the end users, it's the utility companies, it's the local, state, county governments. Everybody plays a role in this. And the more we all work together, the better the outcome. So with that, let's get into the presentation, and then we'll do some questions. So what are they? What are they not? So primarily data centers are facilities that house IT equipment. And we call them campuses because a lot of what we're talking about here in Mason County are hyperscalers. Those entities that offer cloud computing, data storage, etc., for a wide range of folks and across many different zip codes. So they require, again, robust utility networks and the like that we'll get into here. They also require pretty good environmental controls, as you can probably imagine, with the servers and things like that are running. There's a lot of heat generated, and how that heat is dissipated is important because it keeps those servers, that equipment running at their optimal conditions. So who uses them? This just isn't, the hospitals doing research or companies doing high-level computing here. It's, you use JPC or things like that. All of this goes through streaming shows on Netflix. All of these require robust data center, online banking access, social media, everything on the car now that you're able to talk to, and it tells you where to go and how to go and change music stations. All of this uses data center technology. And so there is a national security component to it. I told Judge McNeil I wasn't getting into the political aspects of it, but there is a great need across the country from a national security standpoint. Certainly medical technologies, the advances in research, all of that use, everybody remember Watson, the supercomputer that IBM had? Well, that was sort of the beta version of what you're seeing now across the country. Connected autonomous vehicles, everything from the passenger cars and things like that to now fleet vehicles that we're seeing on the highways. EMS 911, and then that machine language for research in the medical fields and other fields as well in the STEM. And so that all drives the need for infrastructure. Data centers are a subset of development that some people refer to as mission critical. So it's industrial development, data centers, things like that serve a greater purpose to the community. So the types of data centers, we're talking here hyperscalers, but there are others. Co-location, which means multi-tenant data centers. So, I have a company, you have a company, we don't really have space in our walls to do our thing, so we build a facility and we co-locate our data storage. Enterprise, think JP Chase. They have their own, and it's a singular company type of data center for all the transactions that they do on a regional basis. The hyperscalers that we're talking about here, which are, I can tell you the data centers in Central Ohio just don't serve Central Ohio. They serve many, many states around Ohio. Edge, think Netflix. When you try to stream Prime and the football game on Prime, and you get those glitches, and you say some not nice things to your TV, that's because you don't have an edge close to you, and so there's that little bit of time delay. And then the undergrounds, you don't see a whole lot of these, but there's one up in Butler County, Pennsylvania, close to where I grew up. And there's also one out in Springfield, Missouri, Bluebird. The one in Butler County is Iron Mountain. And so they utilize, Iron Mountain specifically, utilizes an old limestone mine. And what that does is provide a little bit of security, a little bit more security than something in the open on the ground. But it also helps people. We talk about the amount of heat that these facilities generate. Underground is a cooler place that helps with not having to provide as much utility cooling. And so what do they need? Well, we talked about they need utilities, particularly fiber, right? Because you can do all these wonderful things inside a building that is on a data center campus, but unless they're tethered to something beyond that site, they're very limited. Workable site trade areas. Need to have a robust labor and workforce, not just for construction, but these facilities require skilled labor. Now, some of it can be community college, technical school kinds of things. Some of it 4-year college stuff, but there's a range of needs that these facilities, these campuses have that need local workforce. Jurisdictional partners. The economics and the taxes, sure, but it goes back to that partnership, right? It's not just, we're talking here county, but we've got the utility folks in the room, there are state agencies that play a role, and all of this just reinforces the point of partnership. You can't, to do these things well, can't have one group going out and trying to control everything. Everybody has to work together to ensure that each one is doing its piece and part in the community to make sure these things can be what they are. Water, I will say, early on when the data centers were being developed, they were almost exclusively cooled by water. And a lot of learnings from that, in that even in Ohio where water's cheap, it's still expensive when you use it on the scale that these things require. And so there's been some coming around. A lot of the developers and end users, particularly the hyperscalers, have committed to net zero thresholds and the like over the next 10, 15 years. That has sort of changed their thinking related to water, either going to closed loop systems for water cooling or getting away from water entirely and going to air cool. Power, we'll get into some of the noise and EMF stuff, but certainly there's the grid power aspects, but there's then what happens if the grid fails? You can't have a mission critical data center, a hyperscale data center, go without power for any length of time. And so even a 5-minute outage, as we've seen somewhat recently with different companies, can have a monumental effect, not just from a society standpoint, but also from an economic standpoint. And so all of these hyperscalers have backup power in the event that emergency power fails. And then citing a data center, I was just talking with Mr. Larger. What I've come to appreciate the most, and I share this with folks when I talk to them, is getting the siting right on these things is priority number 1, number 2, and number 3. Because if it's not right, what you end up with is a data center 2 miles away from your grid utilities. And now you're interrupting everything in that 2-mile corridor to extend fiber, electric, gas, roadway, all of that. And so siting adjacent to reliable power, robust fiber, the labor force, certainly important, and roads. Data centers, when they're fully built out, don't generate the traffic of other uses like residential, like manufacturing. But during construction, when you're talking about bringing in equipment to power these campuses, there is significantly large, oversized, heavy loads coming in, and it's disruptive, like any other construction. And so getting that equipment off the interstate and onto the site as quickly as possible is something that goes a long way. So we live east of New Albany, 15 miles or so, and our office, Kinley Horn's office in Columbus, is along State Route 16, 161, back across. And there was 12 months, 18 months there where there was a lot of data center construction happening in New Albany. It was very inconvenient for my commute. But it's gotten substantially better. And as these data centers come online, it really hasn't been much of an issue for me getting from one point to another. But during construction piece, most state DOTs, most county DOTs are well versed in that, and oftentimes it's the developers and the end users that initiate the conversations. They want to make sure that, when they're delivering a heavy piece of equipment or pieces of equipment, that the roadway networks, the turning all works, that you can certainly stage deliveries to happen outside of the AM and PM peak hours of traffic, but what you can't do is go out and add on pavement in between, right? And so it's those kinds of things that, from a siting perspective are very important. And then, so environmental. In the state of Kentucky, you all are very fortunate with the environmental cabinet. They've got fairly robust requirements, not unlike Ohio, related to natural resources, cultural resources, threatened and endangered species, air quality, environmental documentation, and noise requirements. And so, when we talk about these partnerships and how we develop these campuses to fit with the community, it's important that we leverage partners like the environmental cabinet as we go. And then some of the design requirements that the draft zoning ordinance gets into, setbacks, parking, visual, noise, all of that are things that we talk about. And I will say this, that Mr. Larger and the JPC very proactive in getting out ahead of a lot of these things and offering them up for some discussion. Oftentimes what we see with zoning text, and this isn't unique to data centers, this is just unique to, we don't have this in our community and somebody proposes this, whatever that this is, and there's one of two things that happen. Either the community throws their hands up and says, I'm not sure, or they just literally throw the book at it and say, well, you've got to comply with this and that and the other thing. And so I think the commendable part about what you all have done is you've been thoughtful in how the code's been written, and then you invited some folks in, like myself, to provide some perspective. And not everybody does that. Okay, so that's the presentation. I know you all had some questions. The JPC had some questions. How do you want me to do this, Mr. Large? Just go down the list? Or what do you want to do?
Yeah, let's start with the questions that
Okay.
were submitted beforehand.
Okay, so these are questions that Mr. Larger had sent to me before Thanksgiving that I printed off after Thanksgiving. We're proposing the first question.
Excuse me, Mr. Schultz, just a second. Just to clarify, are these questions that have come from the Planning Commission directly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you get that, ma'am? Yeah, so for the public, these are questions that are being asked by members of the Planning Commission to Mr. Schultz. So please proceed. Thank you.
Sure. So it says, first question, we're proposing 250-foot setbacks from all property lines. Is that distance sufficient for this size facility, or do we need to consider larger distances? And what I would first say is not really a facility, it's a campus, right? But the buildings on the campus, the 250 foot, and I'm speaking from other jurisdictions, the 250 foot, that 200 to 300 foot range is typically reserved for adjacent residential zone property, or property in which residential is a permitted use. The thing about these data centers, if done right, and you locate them against other industrial use, you don't really want the setback against adjacent adjacent industrial use or adjacent manufacturing use to be that big, because you then force those buildings to be closer to something else. And so just something to consider there. The 250 feet, again, is well within the range of residential or properties that could be residential, but you may want to consider something less for those properties that would be more similar in use and not really need to screen like from like. We currently have a height restriction in the I-3 rural, the second question. We currently have a height restriction in the I-3 rural industrial zone of 75 feet. Will this be sufficient for this proposed data center? So generally data center buildings are between 2 and 3 stories. Most that I've been involved with in Ohio and other places have been in the 65 to 75 foot range. I went back through and looked at a couple of more recent projects. I didn't find anything taller than 75 feet, but I can't speak to what's being proposed in this specific data center. Third question, are earthen berms of 4 feet sufficient to contain blowing dust, paper, or other debris generated by the data center? When the data center is built, it's a pretty clean operation. The 4 feet berming comes from more of a screening perspective. During construction, as the site's being developed and dirt's being pushed from one side of the site to the other, you have erosion control practices, goes back to the environmental cabinet there, where every project of this size has to put together a stormwater pollution prevention plan, and so you're controlling for dust and off-site dirt tracking and things like that. And so the mound is really there to be a visual screen, and it comes from more of the, if you think about a car or a vehicle on an adjacent roadway, the height of eye is somewhere in that 3 to 4 foot range. And so why a lot of berms are set at 4 feet is to screen. Now, whether the road's a little bit higher than the site or a little bit lower than the site, then you go ahead and you add the vegetation, whether it's trees or shrubs or things like that, to visually screen. But it's more of a visual screening than it is anything to control dust and debris. Fourth question, what are the lowest noise level restrictions you have seen, and is there any constant noise level in your opinion? Any constant level noise, in my opinion, is too much for this if it is 24/7, 365. The lowest noise levels are in that range of 50 to 55 decibels. That's fairly consistent where we're adjacent residential, and I think your proposed zoning that comes from the city of Maysville is in line with that. As far as the constant noise, again, in what I've seen, the 30 or 40 campuses that I've been involved with over my career, the constant noise is inside the building, the low hum of the servers. But they're behind walls, and not everybody has access to the server room. So even if you're walking in the hallways, you don't hear the hum. Outside the building, the 2 major players for noise are the generators and the chilling equipment. Generally speaking, the generators are located adjacent the data center buildings to minimize the run and minimize the wire size for the electrical. The chillers are sometimes in an equipment yard adjacent the data centers, sometimes on the roof depending on height. But again, in my experience, none of them run all the time. They run as needed and aren't 24/7, 365. What if the facility generates the most noise? Well, it would be the generators and the chillers, but then I would say most of the buildings are located far enough away, at least the ones that I've been a part of, are located far enough away to property line that may not be what is of most concern. It may be that noise generating equipment closest to the property line that may not be as loud as the generators or the chillers in operation, but because of the adjacency to the property line, end up being the concern. And so, when we talk about noise levels and decibel levels and what's being proposed in the code, measuring that to the property line, I think there's a reasonable control there. Sixth question. Are backup generators enclosed in a sound-proven trailer, and how many can be expected to run a large-scale facility? So the generators are in an enclosure, and most generators are in their own enclosure. There aren't multiple, when we're talking about insulation and dampering and things like that. The generators themselves have that sort of noise control, emissions control, all sort of together with them. And then how many? How many is really a function of what the megawatt generation of the building is. So you have like a 400 megawatt data center. Most generators are in that 4 to 10 megawatt, I'd say 2 to 10 megawatt size. So it just depends on the developer and the end user as to how many generators there may be. And I use 400 megawatts as an example. Some can be as small as 50, some can be as much as 800. It just depends on the size of the building. Next question. Have there been any data centers that include their own power generating facility and not rely on the grid for power? We've got a couple in Central Ohio currently under construction, two in fact. They had to go through the state. In Ohio, you have to go through the state power siting board. They've done that. They are about a year or so into construction. And the like. So I don't have any data on how they're doing operationally. But when I do, I will pass it along. What kind of timeline does a large-scale facility take to complete? And how long can the community expect things to be torn up? Well, it's really a function of the size of the site. We've got sites that are 5 acres. We've got sites that are 5,000 acres. So it ranges wildly. And in those 5 to 5,000, not all of the acreage is done in a single time. So it's phased. The initial phase of construction, I would say typically, because that's all I can say with the range, typically 24 to 48, sometimes 60 months for that initial phase. What the public sees adjacent the public streets in that first 12, 24 months, pulling the utilities from the perimeter into the site. Certainly if utilities have to be pulled further than just adjacent to the site, there can be there can be additional time impacts, but that's what I see. Do designers work with residents to minimize impacts to the community before they finalize their design? This would include placement of noise-generating equipment, vibrating equipment, dust, or dirt-generating equipment. So designers work with the communities to minimize those impacts. Certainly, we use the codes and the regulations that we have in place. So for your county, your Mason County, if this zoning text were to be adopted, there would be the local zoning text that would govern. We also have, some Mason County requirements if we were connecting to a county road. We'd have all of the state environmental cabinet stuff to be mindful of. We would also have, if we were connecting to a state road, we'd need to work with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. So all of those things in play that we would have to make sure that we adhere to. Will all supporting structures or facilities be within the footprint of the data center grounds, or will there be some built off-site? I'm going to take this to be critical structures. So electric can be off-site in the sense of the power plant. In Ohio, we also have some larger hyperscale data centers where substations are located on the grounds because they have that kind of need. So that can be either on-site or off-site. The other two things that are generally off-site are water and wastewater treatment facilities. Those are generally off-site. Everything else on-site from a permanent structure standpoint. Who gives priority for power in large-scale outage, such as a winter storm or mechanical breakdown? I'll defer that to my electrical partners in the room from the electrical utility. But what I would say is, back to I think what I said before, these facilities can't be down. There's no amount of downtime that they can withstand. And so, regardless of the prioritization, these facilities are built with redundancy to ensure that if there is a grid failure, the likelihood of any impact to the data center is minimized or eliminated. What, if any, additional requirements are we overlooking that are not included in our draft ordinance? I would just say that these data centers, these hyperscale developments are much different than anything else out there. Not from you use different types of construction equipment to build them. It's just that there's a lot of things that go into them. From the utility networks, the amount of utilities, the size, the capacity of the utilities, and things like that. So I would say, from additional requirements, rely on your partners. You've got the state folks, you've got the county folks, you've got your utility folks. Everybody needs to work together for this stuff to be successful. The zoning text, to be its most, to have the outcomes that you all want to see in the community, to maximize success here, focus the zoning text around the siting aspects, making sure that the appropriate screening, buffering, things like that are in place. It can take a while for the utilities to get themselves worked out, not necessarily where the utility's coming from, but what size, how much, etc. And so, whether it's a zoning site plan with a narrative or some other type of documentation that you all request as part of a zoning package to consider, there's always room to condition, whether it's a disapproval or an approval based on conditions. So, thou shalt get, approval from XYZ water company, power company, etc. Those things from a data center, particularly hyperscale data center perspective, take a little bit of time to get worked out. All the data centers you're involved in, is there anything you would want to do differently or see changed? Siting, just a greater emphasis on siting. And I've kind of come around to that. When you do your first one and it's 5 acres and you're like, okay, it's a data center. That first 5-acre data center used more fiber cable than I think I had laid out on the last 100 private development sites that I've done. It's just a very, very unique development, and having a keen eye, having been involved in as many as I have been, to the siting piece of it is very important for community success. Got to page 2. Have there been claims during construction and up to operations of facilities, any environmental issues, noise, air, surface, subsurface, water pollution, contamination? If yes, what were they and how was the situation rectified? What I have seen, and again, what I have seen, has mostly been a result of erosion sediment control issues during construction. We do our best to put together erosion sediment control plans, but they require vigilance on the part of the contractor to make sure to install it right. And even with that vigilance, there are moments of heavy rains, heavy snow, construction equipment coming in, coming out, that are issues. And so what we do is we reinforce with our development sector clients the need to be very vigilant when it comes to erosion sediment control, because of the frequency of construction traffic in and out and the larger than typical roads. In the operation of the facility, have there ever been any issues with environmental concerns? If yes, what were they and how was the situation rectified? Default back to my previous answer there. Prior to construction, will there be an environmental impact statement completed identifying environmentally sensitive areas, including endangered species habitats that may be adversely affected? If so, will those findings be made available to the public? So through the environmental cabinet, yes, all of those studies need to be done. And they are available to the public through a public records request. Next to last question from the JPC. My understanding, water from Ohio River, a majority of it will be used for cooling the equipment. Once water goes through the plant, is there a possibility the water will be contaminated with e-waste? If so, how will the issue be addressed before water is discharged back to the river? If water is used, again, it's primarily that evaporative cooling or heat exchanger kind of thing. And because the water gets forced through a heating and cooling cycle, the temperature changes. So you cool the water, you run it through the absorbed heat, and so the water's at a higher temperature. And if you were going to discharge that water, you'd have to treat it before it would go back into the river or get reused. All water that's cooled and sent through the cooling networks is considered industrial waste. Because of that elevated temperature, because in the rapid cooling and the heating, there can be the total suspended solids can aggregate The other thing too that some data centers do, I can't speak for all, but some do, is they add corrosion inhibitors to the water to minimize the amount of to maximize the useful life of the pipes that the water is sent through. But with those corrosion inhibitors, again, industrial waste. So the industrial waste regulations would kick into play, have to be treated before being discharged back out. And typically that's municipal treatment in those instances where we had industrial wastewater. It's generally metered because you pay more for that. And also sampling port with it to be able to occasionally come through and make sure the water's within the range that has been agreed upon by the wastewater treatment plant receiving it. And then how will outdated equipment be disposed of? I can't speak to this specific data center, but what I've seen in the past is it's refurbished and used in other industry. It's recycled. It's parted out for repair of other equipment and the like. So those were the questions from the JPC. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. I guess we'll take questions from the audience.
You guys want to continue sitting where you are? Or do you want to face the crowd?
Sorry if I sit.
Please.
Anybody have an objection if I sit?
Chairman Reed, you mind if I ask Mr. Scholl a couple of questions?
No, go ahead.
Mr. Scholl, thank you for being here this evening. Could you give an estimate as to how many data center projects you've worked on in your career?
I'll just call it campuses because there have been multiple projects per campus, 30 to 40.
Okay. Would you say that at present working on data centers, campuses is the primary thing that you do professionally on a day-to-day basis?
Yes.
And how long would you say that that's been the case?
The last 6 years.
Okay. You provided what appears to be curriculum vitae. Did you prepare this?
I did.
Okay. Is this a true and accurate representation of your professional qualifications as supplemented by your testimony this evening?
It is.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, just a reminder, comments next week on the proposed draft ordinance. That's what we're going to be looking for. Take what you hear tonight for what it's worth. Go back, discuss it. If you don't agree with it, research it. Come back. Hope it helps you prepare for next week's comments. What we'll do is a question and answer session.
Do we get to ask a few questions?
Yeah.
There's some
I need your
some
name.
gaps in his.
Just a minute.
Okay. Thank
We'll
you.
get you.
Okay.
I need your name before you talk, or you'll be in here as unidentified.
Yeah.
We'll get back to it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not a debate. It's a question and answer. What we're going to do, since we've got a large crowd, we're going to start with one question per person. If we got time, we'll come back, allow other questions. So what we think we'll do is start this end, go across the row, back across. Hopefully everybody gets a chance to at least ask one question. If you hear something, try not to ask the same question. But other than that, Joe, you want to start off? You have questions?
Mr. Chairman, if we could make couple of clarifications, please. So, we want everybody who wants to ask a question to get the chance to do so. We are keeping a record. This lady down here is keeping a record. If she can't hear you, if she can't hear what you're asking, it's not going to be part of the record. Okay? So if you want to ask a question, make sure you speak up. Make sure you speak slowly and clearly. And please, everyone in the crowd, be considerate. It's much easier for her to do her job if the only people talking are the people who are asking the question and this gentleman down here answering the question. Okay? If you don't like what you hear, keep it in your brain. Don't start muttering about it to the people next to you. Okay? We want a nice, clear record for this evening's festivities. Okay? And before you ask your question, please identify yourself so that the court reporter can make sure that you get credit for your very brilliant question. Okay?
Is it possible to pass that microphone around?
It's possible, but that might lessen the number of questions we get to, because it's going to be a lot of passing back and forth instead of Mr. Shaw just getting right into answering your questions. Okay? So, if you got to yell, yell. But please, everyone else in the crowd, be quiet. Unless you're the one who's speaking.
Could Mr. Shaw please repeat the question before he answers it, so that everybody's sure to hear it? You know, check that microphone.
Yes.
Thank you.
One other thing,
Can I repeat, if you don't give your name, you're going to show up in the record as man or lady. Because I don't know who you are, and I can't write it down what you're saying unless you give me your name.
one other thing, Mr. Shaw is not affiliated with this proposed project. So specific questions about anything he can't answer. But if you have a question that's related, that you want answered about data center, he can relate the ones he's worked on and reference what they did in other communities. But as far as specifics, he's not familiar with that.
Chairman Reed, I'm happy to walk around with that.
Okay,
It's helpful.
yeah.
I'll just walk around. Folks can ask a question and I'll...
That works on the first row, doesn't work too well on the fourth.
Road around one of those specifically, what chemicals do you use, or do they use to process the water? What chemicals are going back into our river, and what chemicals are going into the ground?
So the question was around chemicals in the water, and the question was, what chemicals are you talking the water treatment provider or the data centers use?
The water treatment chemicals that are used to treat the water, and what goes out, and what goes into the ground.
Okay, so from the data center, what the data center would add?
Yeah.
The data center chemicals?
What's going into our water and our ground? What I'm asking.
So I can't speak to this specific data center because I don't know what their intended operations are. Assuming it's water cooled. If it's not water cooled, there is nothing going into the water. If it's air cooled, then it's cooled by fans and things like that, right? So if it's water cooled, nothing should go into the ground. All water, if it's provided by the municipal supply, whatever's added, gets handled as industrial waste and discharged back to the wastewater treatment facility to be processed, treated before it is discharged. Now, maybe that goes back into the river, maybe it goes back into the drinking water supply, but it goes through some sort of treatment process through the regulated public utility before anybody else would see it.
It goes back to our Maysville water treatment plant?
Treatment plant, yes.
Go up.
Okay. Yeah, to go in the ground, you need many other permits from the state. And again, we're talking hyperscalers here, so we're talking many hundreds, if not 1,000-acre campus. There's just too much water there to put back in the ground. So there's, in the 30 or 40 campuses I've been involved with, there were some initial conversations about, hey, we're adjacent, a couple of them outside of Columbus were along the interstate, but the water and sewer wasn't there yet. And so there were a number of, I don't know how many test wells and the like folks tried to drill to, find an opportunity. It's just too much water. And so they ended up, having to work a deal with Columbus to extend water and sewer. And so in all of those communities around Columbus provides the water, Columbus treats the water.
Seems like the data center should be treating the water.
They pay. And if they don't, it's on the water company to up the charges.
Danny Garrison. What about a decommission plan? Do they have a plan once it's obsolete, or is that something that's?
Yeah, so as part of the environmental, okay, so the question was, is there a decommissioning plan? And in all of the stuff I've done in Ohio, there's always been a decommissioning plan prepared for the facility. And I would presume in Kentucky, through the environmental processes, there'll be the same thing.
Janet Harrison. Noise is a big issue. We see it all over the news. We find it all over the internet. They've got recordings of it. You say the noise is not constant, but if they're running air-cooled, it's going to produce a lot of rumble and noise and low-frequency noise that can carry more than a mile, which is really what we're worried about. So what is your recommendation for noise abatement? And when you said siting is a big priority, siting this in such a way to minimize the noise and the low frequencies.
Yeah, so a really good question as it relates to how to damper the noise from noise-generating equipment. And it varies depending on how far away that noise-generating equipment is from the property line. But everything from dampers to sound walls and things like that, and the like. And we've seen any number of solutions to minimize the noise trespass. And each facility been able to comply. Your environmental cabinet has very stringent requirements on noise generating equipment that they monitor. It isn't just take your word for it. In Ohio, same thing. There's testing prior to construction. There's testing during construction. There's testing after operations is commenced. And so all of that is part of the permits. Whether it be emissions, noise, all of that's covered. And so as it relates to this specific development, I don't know specifically what equipment and where and how and proximity. Others have managed it very effectively.
Hank Grady, Versailles, Kentucky. I have not seen your resume. It was held up, and I heard your education, but is there anything in your resume, is there anything in your education and in your job experience that qualifies you to give advice as a land use planner? I heard you're an engineer, and you've worked in wastewater, as I understand it.
Water.
But I didn't hear anything about advising a planning commission about land use planning issues. What is there?
So my role here is not to talk about land use planning. My role here is to talk about my experiences with data center development in Ohio and other jurisdictions, providing you that perspective.
Max Moran. My question is for you. I heard you say that you work on 30 to 40 campuses. With that being said, have there been instances with those 30 to 40 campuses where you've had to work with unwilling landowners who didn't want to sell out or anything, and you guys ended up having to build around them? Was there measures taken to protect their land, their quality of life, and protect them from things like simple erosion?
Sure, good question. Our role as civil engineer is not in the land acquisition piece, but there have been property owners that have elected to stay in the homestead, and so subject to setbacks and all of that prescribed through whatever zoning there was, and then measures taken during construction. Every state has a drainage law that reads something like, "Thou shalt not discharge any more water onto adjacent property than was there before," right? And so that's flow rate and volume, and so we adhere to those things as designers. And then from erosion and sediment control and the like, manage those as well.
Mike Moran, are you being paid to be here?
I am being paid to be here.
Great.
Bill Marshall, and I think I can speak loud enough. 6083 Key Pike. I ask for accommodation not to have to get up and down out of this chair. On page 4, the draft says that all data center equipment must be housed on a grounded metal enclosed structure that resists internal electrical fire for 30 minutes with baffles that automatically close even if the power fails. My understanding is that this level of containment is not standard in data centers. Building codes usually apply to fire-rated rooms or walls, not to every piece of equipment. The metal encased and automatic baffles sounds more like hazardous materials than typical. With your experience, can you think of any benefit to having every piece of equipment have to be in its own little metal enclosure and firewalled and so forth?
So as it relates to building code, we have architects and different other disciplines for that. I haven't seen that to where the code, et cetera, that you're referencing there, that would be architectural, that would be mechanical, electrical, plumbing inside the building. But I have not seen that.
Okay.
Jeremy Jenkins, just in your experience, what percentage of local hires versus travelers do you have during construction and then actually run the facility?
I couldn't tell you that. That's not mine. As it relates to where the workforce is hired from and how many, I know it's a good mix, but percentage-wise, I wouldn't even hazard a guess.
Gail Lincoln, you mentioned that 2 data centers that are self-sustaining are under construction in Ohio. Why is this not the wave of the future so that we do not have all the downsides of having to provide electricity from our local electric co-op for this data center, for instance?
I told Judge McNeil I wasn't going to get into politics, and I'm going to try to keep it at that. Self-generating power isn't all. If each facility generated its own power, as opposed to coming from a central plant, there'd be far more emissions being able to co-locate power generation, and I'll again defer to our experts here, but if each business in the world generated its own power, and then had to treat its own waste, there'd be significant repercussions in society. So I think there is value, having seen it both ways, and I think even from a developer perspective, if there's grid power available, it's better to pay the utility company, even if it's a premium, to make sure that local residents like yourselves aren't bearing the brunt of rates and the like. But there's benefit to others producing power than each use producing its own.
Go on.
Somebody next put their hand up, and I'll get you.
We'll just go.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Rose. Good. Yeah. Excellent.
Hi, I'm Dwayne Sharp, and the question that I had wondered what protections could be put in place for our emergency services, like fire departments, most of which we have are volunteer and understaffed and under-equipped. So if there was a situation where like massive fires broke out and stuff like that, what would be something we could put in place to protect our emergency workers, not only the fire department, but also the police or handling services and stuff like that?
Thank you. I would say that's probably no different than you would if there was an emergency that broke out of a hospital or a school or something like that. Have a plan. Talked about everybody having to work together to make this thing work, and these things work. These data centers are no different than a university, a school, any place that serves a civic function. And I'm not saying data centers, I'm trying to, tell you data centers are the same thing as hospitals, but there's still that critical need for both and all of this stuff in the community. And so develop that plan, develop that partnership, and have those responses in place. I would say for the most part, what I've seen from data centers is a very low reliance on public services. Certainly there's the occasional, smoke detector goes off because equipment malfunctions and the like, but that happens at a school, that happens at a hospital, that happens other places as well. So having that response plan, making sure everybody's on board with it, whether they're paid emergency responders or volunteer, goes a long way in providing peace of mind for the community.
Julie Hollenstein. Some of the concerns that I have are the electric bills, water bills going up. So in your experience with the data centers being built, did you see a rapid increase in homeowners' electricity and water bills rising? And two, did you see any security threats to the data centers where it would require increased police? We don't have enough police officers here, and I'm very concerned about security.
So as far as security, most of the developers and users have their own private security. It's not that they don't partner with the local police and others, but your situation is unique in that there's only so many first responders available, and this technology, the sensitivity of the data, worth the private security investment, is what I've seen. As far as water and sewer, I think your power company has done a great job of getting ahead of this with the tariff. I would say some communities have come to that realization third, fourth generation in. Virginia kind of experienced some of that with not having, some of that was siting and just going anywhere, and then some of it was not having different rate schedules. So I think folks are coming around. I can't speak specifically to your water. It's not something that I am an expert in to know how it affected residential. As far as Ohio goes, the early generation data centers did not have a tariff issue. They now do. The hyperscalers are having to prepay for their utility usage and prepay during the construction phase, even before the system or before the facilities are in operation. Water, I can't speak to water because I don't know how that was hashed out.
Question?
Okay, go this way. I listen to him.
Going back and forth.
David, you want to do
Sorry.
Let's get this exercise. Good enough.
About time you go.
Hi, Julie Burton, JLIEBURTON. Since you've been affiliated with 30 to 40 campuses, which one or ones of those would you recommend in our P&D and or some of those other people who'd like to see them?
So there are a few. New Albany, Hilliard.
Hang on for just a second, Mr. Shaw. Could you repeat her question for the court reporter, please? There's a bit of stuff going on by the door.
Sure. The question was, based on my 30 or 40 campus experience, would I have any recommendations on our JPC or others visiting? So the ones in Central Ohio, I'll tell you, and I forward Mr. Larger in the JPC example zoning code from these three municipalities: City of New Albany, City of Hilliard, City of Dublin. Each one on its own iteration of zoning as it relates to data centers, but all three have found a way to do data centers well.
Could you repeat what you just said at the end? All three have found?
Ways to do data centers well.
I didn't catch that last word.
Well.
Okay.
Yeah. A good balance. Again, do it well.
Sir, what was your name?
My name is Brown.
I'm sorry. He said have found ways to do data centers well.
Owen Brown.
Jason Shepard's my name. Thank you for your time this evening. Appreciate that. So my question to you is, the location of this is in a rural area, projected to be. I agree with you with regards to the sound ordinance being in an industrial zone, that the current target is probably adequate. My question then is, this is particularly like a 2.2 gigawatt facility proposed, and if it's in a rural area where most of that sound is between 30 and 40 when things aren't noisy on a more of a day-to-day basis, what kind of decimal rating would you require or recommend then, and what kind of a setback distance? Thank you.
Sure. So the setback distance and the decibel distances that you all have proposed are in the range of what I would say is what we've seen previously. Okay.
Wait a minute. Okay. One across it. We won't get to you. Questions over there? Coming back. All right. Good man.
Good night.
get Mr. Rita's exercise.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for your time. My name is Mark Hester. Question around, like, it's a hyperscale facility. Does that imply that the servers are AI type servers? And could you explain if there's a type of servers that could be used in a hyperscale or any server, I guess, in a data center?
Sure. So, as it relates to the servers, hyperscale doesn't necessarily mean AI. There's AI in the enterprise servers that JP Morgan chases. So it's not necessarily AI itself. It's just all of it all together. And so each one of the background slides that I had, the number of connected devices in a household, the average number of connected devices in a household is somewhere between 10 and 15 in 2023. And so just all of that, the cumulative aspects of a hyperscale is just all of that. AI, a Siri, directions to McDonald's, all of it kind of adds up. The technology changes.
See? I wonder how far that data center wire has to travel. But the technology in the servers is incredible. When you think about where we were even 10 years ago with that kind of technology and where it's advanced now, it's a lot different.
Peggy Richards, in your experience, have you seen any of these data centers having to come up with their own infrastructure, meaning it's not going to be a burden on any local water, sewer, have their own power, have their own water, have their own treatment facility, have their own security, fire? Have you seen any of these centers that have their own everything, so the community won't be being slaves?
I have not. Oh, sorry. Did everybody hear the question? Do I need to read it? Okay. I have not.
Hey, Michael Hussey, and I appreciate you being here. You're doing your job as hired, but I'm going to go there. In your generally ambiguous perspective, have you ever dealt with or read about a data center project where a parent company has backed a bond for decommissioning and failure to perform, such as backing out of power company commitments?
I have not.
Thank you.
Somebody over there? Coming back, we'll get to you. Come back.
Oh, I can reach. Hey, Charles Beth. My question is, you're talking to me. I heard that the term 2.2 gigawatts of power. If this is being cooled by water in a closed system, you're going to create a heck of a cloud. Do you have any idea of how large that cloud might be compared to, say, what's it, East Kentucky Power? Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know what specifically this development is proposing in terms of cooling. What I can tell you is any emission, whether it's plume out of chiller or plume out of whatever other type of equipment, is regulated by the state. For all of our work in Ohio, all of that has to be submitted and approved as part of a permit. Emissions, exhaust, all of that and approved monitoring during construction, post-construction.
Tom? Oh, you're good at asking questions. Anybody else? All right, let's get to well, we'll start over there. We'll keep that in.
Start coming to Maysville, get exercise. I like it. I like it.
Feel the burn.
My wife will stop nagging me.
Steve Richards, can you share with us on these projects how things are taxed from the standpoint of how does money from these projects end up benefiting the communities in terms of the items that is it taxed on wattage rating, is it taxed on energy consumption? Besides the employment taxes and things like that, property taxes and things, we need to share the way that our planning commission can look at deriving benefit from this. And most of the plants you've worked with have the communities had to give some sort of incentive on the front end to get people to come there, because it seems to me like when you got all the pieces laid out like we do, there shouldn't be much more incentive.
So in the, everybody get that first. So in the early stages, in the sort of version 0, version 1 of data centers, there were economic incentives offered. Some of those offset property tax, some of those offset income tax. Generally, those offsets were put into a tax increments finance district to pay for utility and infrastructure to benefit not just that development in that quadrant, but also the community. More recently, there haven't been aside from Intel, which really isn't data center, it's more chip manufacturing, there really haven't been any incentives that I have seen for that, because again, in these areas, infrastructure has been built out from those version 0 and version 1 type projects. Now, as far as economic benefit here to Maysville, well, there'd be the property taxes, there'd be the income taxes, and whatever other taxes you all are able to leverage or have the ability to leverage. But I am not an expert in tax law, so I will leave that to folks like Judge McNeil and others who do that on a more regular basis.
Owen Brown. When asked for a safe data center setback distance from a family home, Grok AI recommends 1,000 feet or more, at which point noise, vibrations, and emissions drop to negligible levels. Question is, if Grok's wrong, what's the point of AI?
No, I don't argue with AI. What I would say is, yeah. Yes. Yes, sir.
Gavin Perkins. I would like to kind of, tack on to those questions a little bit. One of the ones that Mr. Shevik asked earlier, and you continued to say that you were comfortable with a setback of 250 to 300 feet. Just curious, those past data centers where you've worked and been part of, do you ever receive any complaints from residents, whether it be lighting or noise, either one?
Again, what I've been involved with, the noise is not 24/7, 365.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm asking. I was just asking if there were any residential complaints.
Well, there in a number of these data center campuses that we've done, there is residential right adjacent. And there were questions early on about how the data center campus is going to manage noise volumes and the like. Post-construction, I am not aware of any neighborhood complaints.
Patrick Boggs, and thanks for everybody's questions. We're good. I don't have to ask but one. You in your 30 to 40 projects, and this touched on what Gavin and Jason said. And we're all about growing in Mason County, whether it be residential or whether it be industrial. You're moving to Mason County, where your family has owned a farm here or an old family house. How far, what is the least amount from the generator and chiller you would want that house to be if we're going to bring in more people to Mason County to live?
Again, that 200 to 300 feet.
Not what everybody else has. We want to grow, so what would that be? And your personal place.
Yeah. So again, from my experience of having developed these data center campuses adjacent legacy farms, adjacent folks that have been in the community a while, that 200 to 300 feet is an okay. You could go less. I wouldn't recommend less. I think from residential or residentially zoned properties or residential properties that could be developed residential, that 200 to 300 feet seems to be the zone. Some jurisdictions do more. The maximum 300 to 400, I think, in some of the example code that I have forwarded on to the JPC, but I'm not aware of anything greater than 400.
Is that from the campus or the generator and chiller?
That's from the data center building.
Not the noise makers.
The further you move the noise makers away from the building, the closer you get them to the adjacent property. And the further you move them away from the building, the more expensive the lines connecting them in between become. And so most of what we've done over the last 2 to 3 years has been to locate that, whether it be chillers or generating equipment, if not on top of the roof, adjacent in an equipment yard, to maximize those distances. Because at some point you get to a point where you're having to spend money to spend even more money, and the further you move that noise generating equipment away from the building in which it serves, you end up with having to do additional noise abatement and then pay for larger size wiring and the like to connect that equipment back to the facility. Good question.
Okay. Looks like we're going all the way around. Wait.
Hello.
Good evening.
Yvonne Garrison. My question is on light pollution. I don't think I've heard a question on that one yet. I live in Minerva, out in the country, and with our recent Aurora Borealis event, we've been able to see them in the past year a few times. Our most recent event, it was obstructed by a light that was installed in a parking lot in Minerva. So I'm really concerned about light pollution from a data center campus close to the college. If it's correct. So what can be done about limiting light pollution? Number one, what can be done about limiting light pollution? And then like the other gentleman had asked, have you post-construction heard of any more complaints with light pollution?
Good question. So what can be done? Minimize the amount of light at the property line. Most of the ordinances, if not all of the ordinances that I deal with on a daily basis, don't allow any light trespass to adjacent property. Yeah. I'll have to get back. I'll have to get back to you on up. Just about everything that I've looked at has been down. So through the JPC, I'll get back to you on the up, if that's okay.
Robert Tutworth. So you said about power for the data centers. You said it's a redundancy that they cannot go without power. So most of the power is pulled from the grid. Is there data centers out there now that's not running due to a lack of power? You know what? And the redundancy is that to pull power off the grid. Is that more than one way to get power off the grid, or would that be through their diesel generators?
I get the question. You need me to repeat? Okay. So
let me clarify your question just so I'm clear. You asked that if I know of any data centers that can go without grid power.
That are not running now. That's not running due to the lack of power, economic power, because the grid not having enough to supply power to all the.
I am having trouble hearing you now.
Are there data centers that are not running due to lack of power on the grid?
So there are no data centers not running. We have those two projects in Milwaukee that are under construction that cannot run without the on-site power generation that is currently under construction. So with that setup, the generators don't run 24/7, 365. The generators are linked to battery energy storage systems that store the power for a length of time. And that battery system then runs the facility. And the generators are staggered such that they don't all run at the same time, and they run for how many hours they need to replenish the battery supply. You had another question.
Well, the redundancy, you said that they cannot do without power for 5 minutes. So the power would then come from the diesel generators. If the grid went down, something went wrong with the grid, that's where you would power that and or the batteries, I guess.
So in the case of these that have their on-site power, there's no grid.
And I'm talking about the ones that are on the grid.
All the ones that are on the grid, just the generator backup. Correct.
Any question down here? Okay.
I'm taking my direction. Whoever hasn't asked a question, how about that? Is there anybody who hasn't asked a question?
Yeah.
All right. And then we'll go back in.
My name is Pamela Wilkins. The whole exercise behind this is to create jobs, to bring in other businesses. I'm wondering if the data centers here and they're using up our grid, if new businesses will be able to come here because of that. The other concern I have is it's been reported that there's 400 jobs, but EKPU states there are only 150 to 175. While last week on the television, Elon Musk stated while at the White House meeting with Saudi Arabia and President Trump last week that work will be optional in 2 years. AI expert Tristan Harris and Dr. Roman Yampolosky, an AI safety expert, predicted that by 2030, we all will be facing a 99% unemployment rate.
You have a question?
Yeah. Where is the lucrative? Where's the lucrative? Where is the money coming from? Where's the employment? Where is the jobs? Where's the business?
Well, as long as AI tries to take shortcuts with reasoning, I think we'll all be safe from having our jobs. But, you know, what I have seen, I'm not going the political diving in there, but what I have seen is there are meaningful jobs created by these hyperscalers. This equipment does not run itself. This equipment cannot repair itself. This equipment cannot build itself. And so there are jobs there. There's construction jobs, and then there are operational jobs that come with that, of the range of everything from high school education through technical schools and associate degrees up through advanced degrees. As far as the revenue goes, all of this stuff, I mean, from your Netflix subscriptions to what you pay for your cell phone bill, all of that goes to generate revenue. A portion of it goes to these data centers to be able to operate this equipment. And as long as we become more resilient or more reliant on these kinds of technologies, there will be that revenue stream. How much? All of that really depends on the type of use, how large, and the impacts and the like that I know Judge and his team are looking at.
All right, we've got time for a couple more. Steve Richards again. There's a proposed gas line, a large diameter gas line coming in from beyond, but from the Flemingsburg area in here, is that the redundant, or is that the primary power supply for this data center? Is that what we're doing that for?
I would defer to the Spurlock folks. I don't know.
One more.
Owen Brown again. I took a trip to Manassas, Virginia, and recorded data center noise there. We've just been given 55 decibels as an acceptable level in the property line in residence. This is what it sounds like, and then I've got a question.
We're not interested.
You're not? Okay. Do that like
Can I address light pollution real quick? I never thought of Michael Hussey. I never thought I would care about something like light pollution, but it's real. And I experienced it about a year ago in Boulder, Colorado. Our little industrial park puts out like 10 times the light of the whole city of Boulder, Colorado. You can be
Where's the question?
in Boulder, Colorado, and not even know it's there, seemingly. And our industrial park is like a daylight compared to Boulder. So it can be done and inexpensive.
Hey, Dave, the gentleman here's got a question.
I got an easy question. My name's Bill Barrett.
I like easy questions.
Would your wife allow you to buy a home 250 feet from the data center with a 50?
I don't answer for my wife. Even when I know the answer, I don't answer for my wife. I would have no issues. What was that? I would have no issues. Again, folks, having done this for a number of years, I put my faith in the folks that are reviewing these permits, whether it be noise, whether it be air pollution, etc. Not because I trust blindly, but because I've worked with these folks. I know how they review these applications. I know how rigorously they monitor the before, during, and after. No issues at all.
Thank you.
Wait a minute.
Well, we got one more.
My name's Laura Moran, and I have this question. When a notice of violation is issued to a data center campus, either during construction or during operation, where is the NOV sent to? Is it by email, registered mail, or courier, or do we leave it with the guard at the gate? Where's the NOV sent to once they get what?
It would be sent to the person responsible for that permit. And so each agency has its own way of delivering. I can't speak to how Kentucky Environmental Cabinet issues theirs, but it would be issued to the company and to the individual listed on the permit.
Okay. Need a motion to have a public hearing?
Do you want to put his CD in the record first?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to have a seat where you chat with? Or put yourself in All right, so Michael and I would like a motion from the Planning Commission to enter Mr. Shaw's CD into the record. I'll second.
All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Good.
Now comes a real amazing thing. Can I get out of this,
Unless there are any more questions, then we would need to exit the public hearing.
I need a motion to go out of public hearing. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
No? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Go back into regular meeting. I want to thank everybody for their questions. Hopefully, your comments will help strengthen this data ordinance. Remember, it's a starting point, not a finished product. So, please take time, add your comments to it. We're looking forward to hearing from you. It'll be next the 9th and 10th.
Yep. So it's
Field auditorium.
Right. So, yeah, I would like to say a few things.
Okay.
Hang on, everybody. So, as Chairman Reed mentioned, we are going to have a 2-day public hearing here in the Fields Auditorium, not in this auditorium, in the larger Fields Auditorium here at JPC, starting at 5:30 next Tuesday, December 9th, continuing on at 5:30 on Wednesday, December 10th, in the same location. We'll actually have somewhere around 10 groups speaking. They'll have as many as 20 minutes, and we'll get as much public input as we can. Members of the public will be given 3 minutes. The public hearing is on the proposal, but you can pretty much say what you want. Talk about data centers generally if you want, whether you're for them or against them, et cetera, et cetera. Now for you all, normally I mail you all packets for meetings, but that'll be in 6 days, so I'm not going to mail anything. Is there anything you want me to bring you, any packets you want me to bring? Probably the proposal.
Any proposals has been submitted?
Okay, and if you want Mr. Shaw's comments, which are on the website, by the way. His presentation is also on the website. He updated it. I'm going to put the new version up there too. The proposal's on the website. So a copy of the proposal, the agenda, and you all are just going to be there listening to the public and the groups.
Will we have a copy of the questions and answers today prior to?
Probably.
Yeah.
I think that'll depend upon turnaround time on the court reporter, and I mean, it's whatever they can do, but that's a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah,
right. Well, what I'm going to do tomorrow is I'm going to spell check the list of people who spoke and give that to you, and scan a copy of my minutes form so that you know who made what motion, et cetera, et cetera. So that'll help you. That'll help you do your job. So I'll do that tomorrow. So otherwise, that's your reminder.
Okay. Need a motion to adjourn? Second? All those in favor say aye. Thank you, everybody.